The Bill Shakespeare Project presents This Week in Shakespeare for the week ending Monday, January 7th, 2019. Hola, Bardophiles, I'm Bill, and welcome to the 225th episode of This Week in Shakespeare, a video release brought to you by the Bill Shakespeare Project. Now, we are back from a wonderfully relaxing holiday break, and we hope yours was relaxing too. Just as a reminder, this is our weekly opportunity to let you know about the latest and greatest in Willie Shakespeare headlines coming at you every Tuesday because, well, Tuesday is News Day. The goal here is to hit you with a quick blast, no more than 10 minutes tops, of Bard-related news. Plus, we'll try to serve up some historical dates for what were the past 7 days of the year. So, this week's news stories included the indie music website The Bay Bridged ran year-end retrospective that discussed what they called a Shakespeare cover band, the Frail Ophelias, and their first record, Macbeth, which I really need to check out, obviously. Deadline interviewed Kenneth Branagh on the occasion of the release of All Is True, the new film in which he stars as the aging Bard of Avon. Tahlequah Daily News ran the announcement by Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park of their 2019 season. Twelfth Night, The Comedy of Errors, and The Tempest. The Toronto Star ran an op-ed on the relevancy of Shakespeare in the 21st century, coming to the conclusion that, yes, it's relevant. Like I'm going to argue against that. New City Stage reviewed A Midsummer Night's Dream by Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, running in the Windy City through the end of the month, praising the performance and spectacular visuals. And finally, Sydney Morning Herald reviewed Macbeth by Australian Shakespeare Company, running in Sydney through late February, giving it 3 of 4 stars and saying it's slick, well-paced, and assured. Now let's take a look back on the last 7 days and how they relate to Shakespearean history, both his and the history in his plays. On January 1st, 1605, the first recorded performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream took place at court. On January 2nd, 1939, the film adaptation of Twelfth Night, directed by Michel St. Denis and starring Peggy Ashcroft as Viola, was released in the United Kingdom. On January 3rd, 1437, Catherine of Valois, widow to Henry V and later wife to Owen Tudor, died. She was the mother, with Henry V, of Henry VI, and the grandmother of Henry VII, with Tudor. On January 4th, 1965, poet and critic T.S. Eliot died. What's his connection to Shakespeare? Well, in a paper titled Hamlet and His Problems, he said that the play is most certainly an artistic failure. The evening of January 5th is known as Twelfth Night, a festival concluding the 12 days of Christmas. In medieval and Tudor England, Twelfth Night also ended a winter festival that began back on All Hallows Eve, one in which the Lord of Misrule ruled, turning the world upside down, making kings peasants, and vice versa. On January 6th, 1367, Richard II, son of Edward, Black Prince of Wales, was born. He would, of course, grow up and become the King of England, and then be usurped by Henry Bolingbroke, the future Henry IV. On January 7th, 1355, Thomas of Woodstock, son of Edward III, was born. A member of the Lords Appellant, a group of nobles that was able to limit some of his nephew King Richard II's power in 1388, he was arrested 9 years later and was awaiting trial for treason when he was murdered by men led by Thomas de Mowbray, most likely under the orders of Richard. Within a year, Mowbray would quarrel with Bolingbroke, a conflict that opens the play Richard II and begins a string of dominoes that leads to the end of Richard's reign. And that was your week in Shakespeare, brought to you by the Bill Shakespeare Project. Now, if you've enjoyed this news review, tell a friend and hit the subscribe button to keep from missing these news, reviews, and history videos. For our daily blog and previous Twiz episodes, including links to the news stories we've covered this week, as well as the real Bill Shakespeare Project podcast, check out thebillshakespeareproject.com. And we'll catch you next week.